Today we're looking at the Lightsmith hero talent tree. It's for Holy and Protection Paladins, at least one of their options in the War Within. This is quite an interesting tree because it seems to me that it is extremely problematic, but also cool and bad, I think. I'll go into more detail as to what's problematic, what's cool, and what's bad in a minute. But first, I'll quickly run through the talents. Not all of the information is in these tooltips. Some of it comes from one of the developer interviews about 3 months ago. Lightsmith was one of the first hero talent trees to be released or teased. And one of the Warcraft developers did an interview talking about how a lot of this would work or what their goals were, what they were testing, things like that. So, Holy Armaments. The tooltip doesn't look like it's an active ability, but it is, I believe, supposed to be. We press the button, we spawn a weapon or a shield. Now, the weapon and shields will rotate, so you'll always spawn a weapon and then a shield and then a weapon and then a shield and so on. It stacks up to 2 charges, and what you're doing by spawning a weapon or a shield is spawning with a targeting reticle, a weapon or a shield on the ground that another player or yourself can run through, or you can spawn it on top of people who are already in place or something, and then that will give them a buff. So the shield will give them an absorb shield for 15% of their maximum health on application, and then an additional 5% of their maximum health every 2 seconds. And the armaments last 20 seconds by default. If you spawn a weapon, you buff yourself or somebody else, and you cause their spells and abilities to have a chance to proc additional healing or damage. This seems a little bit like Blessing of Summer in that regard, and I'm hoping that that means it will be regarded in a similar way. I hope that that means that details and Warcraft logs and everything like that attributes the damage from weapons to the Lightsmith Paladin that cast the weapons. But we don't know, we'll see. Rite of Sanctification is a weapon imbuement, kind of like an old seal, but it lasts an hour, which increases your armor by 5% and your primary stat by 1%. It's on a choice node with Rite of Adjuration, which increases your stamina by 3% and causes your holy power spenders to sometimes proc an AoE heal. Solidarity is very much like the Priest Twins talent for PI. It's just going to mean that whenever you pick up an armament, that effect will be duplicated to a nearby ally, or if an ally picks up an armament, that effect will be duplicated to you. Divine Guidance causes your holy power abilities to increase the damage of your next consecration. Now this one's kind of strange. Originally I thought it was just a typo and they meant spender, but the choice node it's with, Blessed Assurance, does use the spender terminology. So I think Divine Guidance might be your holy power abilities, things that generate holy power, Holy Shock, Crusader Strike, whatever, will increase the damage of your next consecration up to a fixed total. And Blessed Assurance will basically do the same thing, but it'll cause your holy power spenders to increase the damage of your next Crusader Strike, Blessed Hammer, or Hammer of the Righteous by 100%. Laying down arms reduces the cooldown of your lay on hands whenever an armament fades or expires, and that expiration will also cause you to gain an infusion of light. This next choice node is interesting. I couldn't quite ascertain exactly what was meant from the developer interview, so I'm not totally sure how this works. Divine Inspiration causes your abilities to have a chance to manifest an armament, and Forewarning, I guess, leaves it as an active ability but reduces the cooldown of them by 20%. From the way it was mentioned in the interview, I think this is a choice node between either randomly proccing slightly more armaments than you would otherwise have if you just press them on cooldown, or you pick Forewarning and you have better control of the armaments, and when you can use them, you reduce the cooldown of them, but you can't proc them randomly. And I think that also might be why the Holy Armaments tooltip doesn't display as an active ability, because if you take Divine Inspiration, it won't be an active. I think they just randomly spawn. The other interpretation is that Divine Inspiration keeps the active ability, but then you also can proc them randomly. I'm not quite sure. We'll have to get into beta and test that out eventually. Fear No Evil and Excoriation are completely useless as far as I can tell. Maybe Fear No Evil is okay in PvP. It just reduces the duration of fear effects while an armament is active, and Excoriation is a 15% slow, which is really not much of anything, in a 5-yard range, which is tiny, around the target of your Hammer of Justice. So that's a bit of a weird one, but whatever. Both of those choice nodes are kind of trash, but I guess it's okay because they're on the same choice node. They can be trashed together. Shared Resolve increases the effects of your active aura by 33% on targets with your armaments. Valiance causes your armament duration to be extended by 3 seconds, or the cooldown reduced by 3 seconds when consuming an infusion of light proc. Hammer and Anvil cause your judgment critical strikes to proc AoE damage around their target. And the Capstone Blessing of the Forge causes Avenging Wrath to summon an extra weapon, and then your weapons, I'm assuming all of the weapons you have out, will proc mirrored or like echoed versions of whatever spells you're pressing. I'm assuming this is going to work a lot like the Holy Priest Divine Image mechanic, where if you press a single target damage button, your images will, and then if you press an AoE heal, your images will press an AoE heal, that sort of thing. As to why this tree is problematic, first and foremost, it is a support talent tree, and it'll either be good and worth having, in which case you're probably always going to want to have it on a protection paladin rather than a holy paladin, and then it leaves the rest of your healing lineup or the healer in your key or something available to be anything else, like bringing PI or any other utilities or things you need. So that's the first problematic problem, because it's going to somehow have to be balanced across roles. The second reason why it's going to be problematic is because I have a hunch that these sorts of support trees will fall into one of two categories. It'll either be considered quite OP and required, or it'll be borderline useless. If it's OP, a lot of groups, raids, Mythic Plus groups, whatever, will always want to try and bring this on a protection paladin, if protection paladin is the only tank that provides this sort of support. If another tanking hero specialization has a similar kind of support talent tree, then this could be balanced. But if every other tank hero tree is just like, buttons to make their tank or the actual tank itself better, and then prop paladins have a support tree that makes the rest of their group better, and the other category is if this whole tree ends up being quite underpowered or considered pretty trash, then holy paladins are going to feel forced into playing Herald of the Sun, because this whole tree is really based around armaments and doesn't really tie into much of the rest of the spec. And that is, I guess, the third reason why it's going to be problematic, is because this whole spec lives and dies by the tuning of one ability. It's not like it's got some other good tie-ins or hook-ins to the rest of the tree, or it does anything else fancy or cool. It really is just, are the holy armaments good? If so, you play Lightsmith always. If they're bad, you never play it. If we do a bit of napkin math with the current numbers, then it looks like, at least defensively speaking, this is the sort of thing that falls into the crazy, powerful, super OP category. I'm guessing these armaments have a fairly low cooldown. We don't know what it is yet, but they have a 20-second duration. The interview suggested that they should be up most of the time, maybe even almost always have one active, or at least they weren't talking about them as if there was some kind of big cooldown ability where you just press it once a minute or every 2 minutes or something like that. It looks like armaments are supposed to be more of a rotational thing. And if that is the case, then being able to give someone in your group, or even a tank with a lot of health, a shield for 15% of their maximum HP is kind of insane, especially when that gets mirrored to you as well. And then a 5% heal or a 5% absorb shield every 2 seconds for the duration of the armament for 20 seconds total can stack up to a maximum absorb shield for 30% of your health. If we took those kind of numbers and applied it to right now in Dragonflight to a fully geared character, and I'm not talking about tanks with like a huge metric ton of health, I mean just your normal fully geared characters that have roughly 1 million health, and the fact that the bulwark is going to be applied to at least 2 targets, or there's going to be at least 2 of them out at a time, that's 25k HPS per shield. That's 50k HPS. So that in and of itself is already really quite strong. If the weapon is in the same ballpark or universe of impact as the shield is, then this is going to be so crazy strong, it's going to make PI, or the proposed Oracle PI tree look like nothing. As to the criteria that Blizzard mentioned in the interview and again talked about in their blue post for hero talent trees, is there enough damage healing to be significant but not overshadow the class or spec tree? Yes, I believe there will be. Just from the defensive ability alone, it's pretty good, I think. As long as this isn't like a 2-minute cooldown or something, then yeah. Are both the trees roughly balanced in PvP, Mythic Plus and Raid? Fairly impossible to say right now. We don't have enough information. Don't know how many armaments they'll be out at any given time, or how many you can get, or anything like that. We know that you can get at least 3, because if you save up 2 charges and press wings, you'll have 3. Maybe more than that is possible with Divine Inspiration, or extending the duration of them with Valiance. We really just don't know. Does the tree feel required due to 1 talent feeling mandatory? No to the 1 talent feeling mandatory, unless you're counting the first talent, like the whole tree. But like I said at the beginning, one of the reasons why this is problematic is because if it's good, it's going to be really good. And if it's bad, it's going to be completely useless. I feel like this is a bit of a knife's edge. It's going to be very difficult for Blizzard to balance this. So yeah, it might feel mandatory. Does the tree affect your capabilities, rotation, combat focus, or UI? Yes, but not in the ways that I would like. You see, on the one hand, I like the idea of the Lightsmith, the armaments, the weapons, the shield. It's very cool. I've also always been a big fan of like Power Infusion and Blessing of Summer. The abilities that allow me as a healer to contribute damage to my group without me having to do the damage myself. And the weapons are another example of that, I think. So yeah, that should be pretty fun. So I like the idea of it, but the implementation of it I think is quite poor, which is also why I said at the beginning that it's bad. Because this is another example of one of those hero trees where Blizzard introduce a mechanic with the first talent, and then they spend 9 passives making it slightly better here and there with a capstone or whatever, and you basically have a whole tree that boils down to one thing, or one mechanic, or one button, that doesn't do a good job of tying into the rest of the specs toolkit. I would like to see the armaments cost holy power maybe, or even consume infusion of light procs or something like that, so that they could tie into the rest of the spec more, so you would have more ways to play around it. Hopefully that would also mean that the armaments could be more powerful than they would otherwise be. Maybe powerful enough to like really make you think about when you're using them, or really make you try and extend their duration as much as possible. But the danger there as well is if they aren't powerful enough, I'm pretty sure they will be clunky enough to make it not that enjoyable to play. There was an interesting comment from my Herald of the Sun video that the tree was adding button bloat to a spec that already suffered from button bloat, which I found interesting because the Herald of the Sun tree was really just a bunch of passives with Eternal Flame, but I also agree with the comment. What I do not want to see happen is Lightsmith and armaments feel like they're just an extra button to press. And Holy Paladin already suffers from that issue, I would say. We press Holy Shock on cooldown, Judgment on cooldown, Consecration on cooldown, Holy Prism on cooldown, Hammer of Wrath when it's available, usually on cooldown if possible. And I don't want to see armaments become just another ability that you press on cooldown, which is why I suggested maybe adding a cost to them so that they can be more impactful and worthy of playing around. I can't tell if the current state of Holy Paladin is a result of the rework or the balance problems it has right now, but the playstyle has become surprisingly rigid. Doesn't feel like it really flows anymore. You just press a whole bunch of things on cooldown. And I'm hoping that the implementation improves enough so that these armaments don't add to that. But we'll see. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and algorithm stuff.